The stellar haven was huge. It floated in space like a small moon, spinning slowly between human territory and Vrakath space. Thousands of beings lived and worked there. Humans, Vrakath, and dozens of other species all shared the same corridors and breathing the same recycled air. Today was special. Today the diplomats were meeting to sign a treaty that could end decades of tension. Daehyun didn't care much about politics. He was a maintenance engineer, and his job was to keep the lower levels running smoothly. He spent his days in the forgotten parts of the station, fixing pipes and checking systems that most people never saw. He liked it that way. Quiet, simple, no drama. He was eating lunch in the maintenance break room when the alarms started blaring. Red lights flashed in the corridors. His communicator buzzed with urgent messages. Something was very wrong. The overhead speakers crackled to life. All personnel, this is Captain Yuna. We have a code black situation. The station is now in full lockdown. Nobody leaves their current section until further notice. Security teams report to your designated positions immediately. Code black, that meant someone important was in danger. Daehyun grabbed his tool bag and headed toward his assigned post in the lower maintenance sections. He could hear people talking nervously in the corridors above. Their voices echoed down through the ventilation shafts. On the diplomatic level, chaos had erupted. Ambassador Hira of Clan Bloodridge stood in the center of her quarters, her massive body trembling with barely controlled rage. She was 7 feet tall, covered in dark fur with silver streaks running through it. Her eyes glowed with an internal light that got brighter when she was angry. Right now they blazed like small suns. Her cubs were gone. Cal and Neri had vanished from the secured room where they were supposed to be sleeping. The door was still locked from the outside. The windows were sealed, but the cubs had disappeared like smoke. Hira's bodyguards searched frantically, tearing through closets and checking under furniture. They moved with desperate speed because they knew what was coming. They had seen the signs before. Hira's breathing was getting faster. Her claws were extending. The bioluminescent markings on her arms were pulsing rapidly. She was entering the mother's rage. In Vrakath culture, nothing was more sacred than protecting cubs. When a mother thought her children were in danger, her body released powerful chemicals that made her stronger, faster, and far more dangerous than normal. During the mother's rage, a Vrakath parent would kill anything that stood between them and their offspring. Friend or enemy, it didn't matter. Captain Yuna arrived at the diplomatic quarters with a full security team. She was a veteran officer who had served on 6 different stations, but she had never dealt with anything like this. Through the doorway, she could see Hira pacing back and forth like a caged tiger. The ambassador's brother, a warrior named Thek, was trying to calm her down. It wasn't working. Ambassador Hira, Yuna called from the doorway, keeping her voice steady. We will find your cubs. Every security team on the station is searching right now. Please, you must trust us. Hira turned toward her. The Vrakath's eyes were completely white now, glowing with that terrible inner light. When she spoke, her voice was like grinding stone. Trust. My cubs are missing on a human station. If any harm has come to them, I will tear this place apart deck by deck until I find them. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Thek stepped forward, placing himself between his sister and the humans. He was calmer, but his hand rested on the weapon at his hip. We will conduct our own search. Our methods are more thorough than yours. Yuna knew what that meant. Vrakath search methods were brutal and terrifying. They would rip through walls, interrogate anyone they found, and show no mercy if they thought someone was lying. She needed to prevent that, but she also needed to find those cubs fast. Give us 2 hours, Yuna said. 2 hours before you begin your own search. That's all I ask, Hira snarled, showing teeth that could bite through metal, but Thek nodded slowly. 1 hour. After that, we search our way. Far below the diplomatic levels, Daehyun was checking the environmental systems in subsection 7 Delta. This area was rarely visited by anyone except maintenance crews. The corridors here were narrow and dimly lit, filled with pipes and electrical conduits. He could hear the hum of machinery all around him, the heartbeat of the station. He was testing a pressure valve when he heard it. A small sound almost lost in the background noise, chittering, like birds but not quite. He froze, listening carefully. There it was again, coming from the ventilation shaft above his head. Daehyun climbed up on the equipment box and opened the vent cover. He shined his flashlight inside and his heart stopped. 2 small faces looked back at him. They had large eyes that reflected his light like mirrors. Their fur was soft and spotted, still showing their juvenile patterns. Small crystalline ridges ran along their foreheads, glowing with a soft blue light. Vrakath cubs. He was looking at Vrakath cubs. They were stuck in the shaft, wedged between the metal walls. The smaller one was making those chittering sounds, clearly distressed. The larger one was trying to protect its sibling, positioning itself defensively even though it was obviously exhausted and frightened. Daehyun's mind raced. These had to be the ambassador's cubs, the ones everyone was searching for. But how had they gotten down here? The diplomatic level was 12 sections above this location. They must have crawled through the ventilation system, getting lost in the maze of shafts that ran through the station. He needed to call security immediately. But when he reached for his communicator, he saw the warning light. No signal. The radiation shielding in this section blocked most transmissions. He would have to go back up 3 levels to get a clear connection. Then he saw something that made his blood run cold. On the wall panel next to him, a countdown was running. 15 minutes until the scheduled radiation flush. This entire section would be flooded with high-energy particles to clean out accumulated stellar dust. Anything living in these corridors would be killed, including 2 frightened cubs stuck in a ventilation shaft. Daehyun looked at the cubs again. They were watching him with those large, intelligent eyes. The smaller one reached toward him with one tiny paw, claws retracted, making a soft pleading sound. He thought about the stories he'd heard about Vrakath. They were predators, warriors. Their society was built on strength and violence. Approaching their cubs without permission was a death sentence in their culture. They would see it as attempted kidnapping or worse. But he also thought about his younger sister back on Earth. She used to make that same sound when she was scared and wanted him to help her. These were just children. Lost and frightened children who would die if he did nothing. Daehyun made his decision. He put down his tool bag and spoke softly in Korean, mixing in the few Vrakath words he had learned from the station's translation database. "It's okay. I'm here to help. Don't be afraid." He reached into the shaft carefully, moving slowly so he wouldn't startle them. The larger cub hissed at him a warning sound, but the smaller one, driven by desperation, grabbed onto his sleeve with both paws. Somewhere far above, he could hear the distant sounds of heavy footsteps and roaring voices. The Vrakath warriors had begun their search, 1 hour be damned. They were tearing through the station, getting closer with every passing minute. The countdown on the wall read 12 minutes. Daehyun carefully pulled the smaller cub from the ventilation shaft. She was heavier than she looked, maybe 30 kilograms of solid muscle under that soft fur. Her claws dug into his jacket as she clung to him, but she kept them retracted enough not to pierce through to his skin. She was trying not to hurt him. The larger cub was more difficult. He was protective and scared, hissing every time Daehyun reached for him. But when his sister called out to him with soft chirping sounds, he finally relented. Daehyun pulled him free as well, and both cubs immediately huddled against his chest, trembling. 10 minutes until radiation flush. Daehyun looked at the cubs in his arms. Their bioluminescent markings were pulsing rapidly, flashing between blue and red. He had read somewhere that this meant extreme stress in young Vrakath. They were exhausted and terrified. The smaller one looked up at him with those huge eyes and made a sound that broke his heart. It was the universal sound of a scared child wanting comfort. He couldn't just call security and leave them here while he went to find a working communicator. The radiation would kill them, and he couldn't carry them in his heavy tool bag at the same time. He would have to leave his equipment behind. "Okay, little ones," he whispered in Korean. "We need to move fast. Can you hold on tight?" The cubs didn't understand his words, but they seemed to understand his tone. When he stood up and started walking, they climbed up his body like he was a tree. Their claws found purchase in his jacket and shirt. The pain was sharp as some claws broke through the fabric and scratched his skin. But Daehyun gritted his teeth and kept moving. The smaller cub positioned herself on his back, wrapping her arms around his neck. The larger cub climbed onto his shoulders, his tail wrapping around Daehyun's waist for balance. Together they weighed about 60 kilograms. It was like carrying another full-grown person on his back. Daehyun started walking toward the nearest exit from the radiation zone. His back and shoulders already ached from the weight, but he forced himself to move faster. 8 minutes left. The cubs made soft sounds as he walked, almost like purring. He could feel the vibrations through his chest and back. Despite everything, despite the fear and the pain and the impossible situation, he felt something strange. The cubs trusted him. They had chosen to hold on to him, to let him carry them to safety. The corridor ahead split into two directions. Left led to a maintenance elevator that would take him up to the main levels quickly. Right led to a longer route through the access tunnels, but it was safer and less likely to be patrolled by Vrakath warriors. Daehyun chose left. Speed was more important than stealth right now. He reached the elevator and pressed the button. Nothing happened. He pressed it again. Still nothing. The display panel showed an error message. The elevator had been locked down as part of the security protocol. 6 minutes. No, Daehyun muttered. He tried his access card, entering his override code. The system rejected it. During code black lockdown, only security personnel could use the elevators. He was trapped. The cub on his shoulders made a questioning sound, sensing his distress. Daehyun turned and ran toward the right corridor instead. The access tunnels would have to work. They were slower, but at least they were still open. The access tunnel was barely wide enough for one person. Daehyun had to turn sideways in some places to fit through with the cubs on his back. Pipes and electrical conduits lined the walls, some of them hot enough that he could feel the heat radiating off them. The cubs pressed closer to him, trying to avoid touching the hot surfaces. His lungs were burning. The cubs were heavy and the air in the access tunnels was thinner than in the main corridors. Sweat dripped into his eyes. His legs felt like they were made of lead, but he kept moving because stopping meant death for all three of them. 4 minutes. Above them, on the main levels, the search was growing more violent. Thek and his warriors had split into teams, systematically clearing each section. They weren't gentle. Doors were torn open. Equipment was thrown aside. Anyone they encountered was questioned aggressively, warriors looming over them with barely controlled fury. Captain Yuna followed behind them, trying to keep the situation from exploding into violence. She understood their desperation, but she also had to protect the other people on the station. It was a nearly impossible balance. "Please," she said to Thek as he ripped open another storage locker. "You must give us more time. Our sensors show no life signs in the areas you're searching. The cubs aren't here." Thek turned to her, his eyes cold. "Your sensors are useless. Vrakath cubs have low thermal signatures. Your machines cannot detect them easily." He moved past her toward another section, "And my sister is beyond reason now. If we do not find Cal and Neri soon, she will begin killing, starting with whoever she believes responsible." Yuna felt ice in her stomach. She had hoped they had more time, but clearly they didn't. She activated her communicator. "All security teams, expand the search to the lower maintenance levels. Check every corridor, every room, every shaft. Find those cubs now." In the access tunnel, Daehyun heard voices echoing through the ventilation system. Vrakath voices speaking in their growling language. They were getting closer. The cubs heard them too and became very still, their bodies tense against his back. 3 minutes. Daehyun saw light ahead. The end of the access tunnel opened into a small maintenance junction that connected to the main corridors. If he could reach it, he would be out of the radiation zone. He pushed himself harder, his vision starting to blur from exhaustion. The smaller cub on his back made a soft sound and pressed her face against his neck. He could feel her warm breath on his skin. Despite being a predator from a species known for violence, she felt so small and fragile. Both cubs did. They were just children who had gotten lost and scared. 2 minutes. Daehyun stumbled out of the access tunnel into the maintenance junction. His legs were shaking. Black spots danced at the edges of his vision. But they had made it. They were out of the radiation zone with 90 seconds to spare. He leaned against the wall, gasping for breath. The cubs climbed down from his back and huddled near his feet, looking up at him. Their bioluminescent markings had changed from the rapid red-blue flashing to a steady soft green. They were calming down. The larger cub, the male, reached up and touched Daehyun's hand with his paw. The gesture was unmistakable. "Thank you." Daehyun smiled despite his exhaustion and pain. "You're welcome, little ones. Now let's find your mother before she tears this station apart looking for you." He tried his communicator again. This time it worked. But before he could send a message, he heard something that made him freeze. Heavy footsteps, coming from both directions in the corridor outside the junction. And they were moving fast. The cubs heard it too. They both made excited chittering sounds and tried to run toward the corridor. Daehyun grabbed them, pulling them back. He didn't know if those were friendly footsteps or not. If Vrakath warriors found him alone with the cubs, they might attack first and ask questions later. But the cubs were strong and determined. They pulled free from his grip and ran out into the corridor. Daehyun had no choice but to follow them. He stumbled out after them, his body screaming in protest. He turned the corner and stopped dead. The corridor was full of Vrakath warriors, weapons drawn, and standing at the front, her eyes blazing with that terrible white light, was Ambassador Hira. Time seemed to slow down. Daehyun stood in the corridor entrance, breathing hard, his clothes torn and blood seeping through his jacket where the cub's claws had pierced his skin. 60 meters away, Ambassador Hira stood surrounded by her warriors. Between them, Cal and Neri had frozen in place, suddenly unsure. Behind the Vrakath, Daehyun could see human security forces. Captain Yuna was there, along with at least 20 armed officers. Their weapons were pointed at the Vrakath warriors. The Vrakath weapons were pointed back. It was a standoff that could turn into a massacre with one wrong move. Hira's eyes locked onto Daehyun. Even from this distance, he could feel the weight of her stare. She was in the full grip of mother's rage now. Her breathing was loud and harsh, almost like growling. The bioluminescent markings that covered her arms and neck were blazing bright red, pulsing with her heartbeat. She took one step forward. Every weapon in the corridor shifted, tracking her movement. The air felt electric with tension. "Nobody move," Captain Yuna shouted. Her voice echoed off the metal walls. "Everyone stay calm. We can resolve this peacefully." But Hira wasn't listening to human words anymore. Her eyes were fixed on her cubs and on the human male standing behind them. The male who was bleeding. The male her cubs had just run away from. In her rage-clouded mind, there was only one explanation. This human had taken her children, had hurt them, had hidden them from her, she roared. It was a sound that came from deep in her chest, a sound that evolution had designed to terrify prey animals. It worked. Several of the human security officers actually stepped back, their faces pale. The sound echoed through the corridor like rolling thunder. Daehyun felt his legs go weak. Every instinct in his body screamed at him to run, to hide, to get away from the massive predator that was about to charge at him. But he couldn't move. He was too exhausted, too hurt, and too shocked by what was happening. That grabbed his sister's arm, trying to hold her back. "Hira, wait! Look at the cubs. They are unharmed." They ran to him, not away from him. Something is different here. Hira shook him off with terrifying strength. She took another step forward, her claws extending from her hands. Each claw was as long as a human finger and sharp enough to cut through metal. She was going to kill him. Daehyun could see it in her eyes. Then Neri, the smaller cub, did something unexpected. She ran back toward Daehyun, not away from her mother toward safety, but back to the human who had carried her. She reached him and immediately started climbing up his leg, chittering frantically. Cal hesitated for only a moment before following his sister. He ran back to Daehyun as well, climbing up the other side. Within seconds, both cubs were clinging to Daehyun again, wrapping themselves around him protectively. They were making loud chirping sounds directed at their mother. Not sounds of fear, but sounds of protest. They were defending him. The corridor went completely silent. Everyone stared in disbelief. In Vrakath culture, cubs only clung to family, only to those they trusted absolutely. It was an instinctive behavior that couldn't be faked or forced. Cubs could sense danger and intent. If this human had harmed them or threatened them, they would never voluntarily return to him. They certainly wouldn't cling to him while facing their own mother. Hira stopped moving. The red glow of her markings began to fade slightly, shifting toward orange. Her breathing slowed. The chemicals of the mother's rage were still flooding her system, but confusion was beginning to cut through the fury. This wasn't right. This didn't match what her rage brain was telling her. Captain Yuna saw the opening and took it. She lowered her weapon and held up both hands. "Ambassador Hira, please listen. I don't know exactly what happened, but I don't think this man hurt your cubs. Look at them. They feel safe with him." Tek moved carefully past his sister, approaching Daehyun slowly with his hands visible and empty. The human security forces tensed but didn't fire. Yuna had trained them well. Tek stopped about 3 meters away, studying the scene with intelligent eyes. "You are bleeding," Tek said in heavily accented but clear human language. "The cubs did this with their claws." "Yes," Daehyun found his voice. It came out rough and shaky. "Yes, they had to hold on. I was carrying them. They didn't mean to hurt me." "Carrying them from where?" "Subsection 7 Delta, the lower maintenance level. They were stuck in a ventilation shaft. There was a radiation flush coming. I had to get them out." The words tumbled out of Daehyun in a rush. I couldn't contact security. My communicator didn't work down there. I couldn't leave them to die. Thek's eyes widened slightly. He turned to one of his warriors and spoke rapidly in Vrakath. The warrior checked a data pad and nodded, showing Thek the screen. Thek looked back at Daehyun with new understanding. Subsection 7 Delta was scheduled for radiation cleansing 17 minutes ago, Thek said slowly. You carried both cubs from there to here in 17 minutes? Daehyun nodded, too tired to speak. Thek turned to his sister and spoke in Vrakath. Daehyun couldn't understand the words, but he could hear the tone. Thek was explaining, reasoning, trying to pull Hira back from the edge of violence. Hira's eyes shifted from white back to their normal golden color. The rage was fading, but it left behind something more complex. She looked at her cubs, still clinging to this strange human male. She looked at the blood on his jacket, the torn fabric, the way he was swaying on his feet from exhaustion. She looked at his face and saw no fear there now, only concern for her cubs. She began walking forward again. This time her warriors didn't follow. They understood what was happening. This wasn't an attack. This was something else entirely. The human security forces raised their weapons again. Ambassador, Yuna called out. Please, slowly. Don't make any sudden moves. Hira ignored her. She walked straight toward Daehyun with steady, deliberate steps. Each footstep was heavy enough to make the deck plates ring. She was huge, towering over him even from meters away. As she got closer, Daehyun could see every detail of her. The scars on her arms from old battles. The silver streaks in her dark fur that marked her age and status. The sharp teeth that she could use to tear him apart in seconds. She stopped right in front of him. So close he could feel the heat radiating from her body. She was staring down at him, and he was staring up at her with two cubs clinging to him between them. Neri chirped and reached out one paw toward her mother. Hira's expression softened. She gently touched her daughter's head, running her claws through the soft fur. Then she looked at Cal, who was watching her warily but didn't move away from Daehyun. You saved them, Hira said. Her voice was deep and rough, but the words were clear. You bled for them. You risked yourself for cubs that were not your own? Daehyun didn't know what to say. Anyone would have done the same. No. Hira shook her head slowly. Not anyone. Many would have called for others and waited safely. You did not wait. You acted. She reached out with one massive hand. Daehyun flinched involuntarily, but she didn't hurt him. Instead, she carefully touched his shoulder where the blood was seeping through. Her claw came away red. You carried them while they wounded you. You did not stop, even in pain. She pulled her hand back and looked at the blood on her claw for a long moment. When she looked back at Daehyun, something had changed in her eyes. The fury was completely gone now, replaced by something that looked almost like wonder. What is your name, human? Daehyun. I'm a maintenance engineer. I was just doing my job, checking systems, and I found them. I couldn't just leave them there. They were scared. Hira tilted her head slightly, studying him. Then she did something that made everyone in the corridor gasp. She knelt down, lowering herself until her eyes were level with his. For a being her size, it was a gesture of enormous significance. Vrakath warriors never knelt to anyone except their clan elders and their own cubs. Daehyun, she said carefully, pronouncing his name with deliberate respect. You have given me back what I value most in this universe. My children live because of you. In my culture, this creates a debt that can never be repaid with mere words or wealth. She reached up and pressed her forehead against his. Daehyun stood very still, aware that this was important but not understanding exactly what it meant. He could feel the warmth of her skin, smell the strange spice-like scent of Vrakath fur. I name you Cub Guardian, Hira said, her voice carrying through the silent corridor. You are clan now. You are family. My blood is your blood. My enemies are your enemies. And my cubs are your cubs to protect, as you have already proven you will do. She pulled back and stood up, turning to face both the Vrakath and human forces. This human is under the protection of Clan Bloodridge. Any who harm him answer to me personally. The medical bay was unlike anything Daehyun had ever experienced. On one side of him, a human doctor was carefully cleaning the claw wounds on his shoulders and back. On the other side, a Vrakath healer was applying some kind of paste that smelled like mint and made his skin tingle. They worked together without speaking, moving around each other with practiced efficiency that would have seemed impossible just hours before. Captain Yuna stood in the doorway, watching the whole thing with an expression that mixed amazement and exhaustion. She had spent the last hour preventing a diplomatic disaster and managing the aftermath. Now she was watching history being made in a medical bay. Cal and Neri refused to leave. They sat on the floor next to Daehyun's medical bed, their heads resting on their paws, watching every movement the doctors made. Whenever someone came too close too quickly, both cubs would growl softly, a warning sound. The human doctor had learned to move very slowly and announce what he was doing before he did it. "These wounds are deep," the doctor said, examining Daehyun's shoulder. "The claws penetrated about 2 centimeters in several places. You're lucky they missed any major blood vessels, but you're going to be very sore for a while." The Vrakath healer made a rumbling sound that Daehyun had learned meant agreement. "The paste will help healing. Fast. Better than human medicine alone. You will have scars, but small ones." "Scars are fine," Daehyun said. He was too tired to care much about scars. Every part of his body ached. His muscles felt like they had been replaced with concrete. He just wanted to sleep for about 20 hours. Neri made a soft sound and stood up, walking over to the bed. She put her paws up on the edge and looked at Daehyun with those large, guilty eyes. She touched one of the bandages gently with her nose, then looked up at his face and chirped sadly. "She apologizes," the Vrakath healer said. "She knows she hurt you." Daehyun reached down and carefully patted her head, running his fingers through her soft fur. "It's okay, little one. You didn't mean to. You were just holding on tight like I asked you to." Neri purred, a sound like distant thunder. She rested her head against his hand, closing her eyes. Ambassador Hira entered the medical bay, and everyone except the cubs stood a little straighter. She had cleaned up and changed into formal diplomatic robes, but her presence was still overwhelming. She moved with the grace of a natural predator, every step deliberate and controlled. She looked at her cubs, then at Daehyun. "How is he?" "He will recover fully," the Vrakath healer said. "The wounds are not serious. He was very lucky." "Not luck," Hira said quietly. "Courage and determination. Those are not the same as luck." She approached the bed, and the cubs immediately moved to her, rubbing against her legs and chirping happily. She touched each of them gently, reassuring herself once again that they were truly safe. Then she looked at Captain Yuna. "I must apologize to you and your security forces. My rage put many people in danger. I was not in control." Yuna stepped forward. "Ambassador, no one was hurt, and we understand the circumstances. Any parent would have reacted strongly to their children going missing. The important thing is that Cal and Neri are safe thanks to Daehyun." "Yes," Hira agreed. She turned back to Daehyun. "Thanks to him. Which brings me to a complicated matter. Daehyun, you are now considered part of my clan by Vrakath law. Do you understand what this means?" Daehyun shook his head. "Not really. I'm just a maintenance engineer. I don't know much about Vrakath culture." Hira settled into a chair that creaked under her weight. The cubs immediately climbed into her lap, a tangle of spotted fur and glowing markings. "Then I will explain. When I performed the Krishara and named you Cub Guardian, I bound you to Clan Bloodridge. In our culture, this is not a symbolic gesture. It is a legal and social reality." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "You are now responsible for the safety and well-being of Cal and Neri. They are your cubs as much as they are mine. You have the right to discipline them, teach them, and make decisions about their care. In exchange, you receive the full protection of the clan. Anyone who harms you faces clan justice. You may call upon any member of Clan Bloodridge for help, and they are bound by honor to answer." Daehyun stared at her. "But I don't know how to take care of Vrakath cubs. I don't know anything about raising children, especially not alien children. I'm not qualified for this. You carried them through dangerous territory, while injured and exhausted, never once considering leaving them behind. You are more qualified than you think." Hira stroked Neri's head gently. "Besides, the cubs have chosen you as well. Look at them. Both cubs were watching Dae-hyun from their mother's lap. When they saw him looking back, their markings pulsed with that soft green color that meant contentment. Cal made a chirping sound and tried to climb down toward him, but Hira held him back gently. They feel safe with you, Hira continued. They trust you. In Vrakath culture, we believe cubs can sense the true nature of people. They are never wrong. You risked everything to save them when you had no reason to. You could have called for help and protected yourself. Instead, you bled for them. The cubs know this. They will remember. Captain Yuna cleared her throat. Ambassador, with respect, Dae-hyun is a human citizen and a station employee. We can't just assign him to Vrakath cultural roles without his consent. Of course, Hira said. He may refuse if he wishes, but he should understand what he is refusing. The role of Cub Guardian is one of the highest honors in Vrakath society. It is given only to those who have proven themselves worthy through action, not words. In our entire history, no non-Vrakath has ever held this title. She looked at Dae-hyun seriously. If you accept, you will be the first. You will change how my people see humans. You will be a bridge between our species. If you refuse, I will understand, but the cubs will not. They are young, but they already know you saved them. They will not forget their cub guardian. Dae-hyun felt the weight of everyone's eyes on him. He looked at the cubs, at their innocent faces and trusting eyes. He thought about the moment in the ventilation shaft when Neri had reached for him, asking for help in the only way she could. He thought about Cal's protective stance, trying to defend his sister even when he was terrified. I don't want to cause a diplomatic incident, he said slowly. And I don't want to promise something I can't deliver. But I couldn't leave them before, and I can't abandon them now. If they need me, I'll be there. I'll try to be what they need, even if I don't really know how. Hira's expression softened into something that might have been a smile. That is all anyone can ask. You will learn. We will teach you. And the cubs will teach you as well, in their own way. She stood, lifting the cubs with her. They protested with small growls, not wanting to leave. Now you must rest. The doctor says you need sleep to heal. The cubs and I will return tomorrow. Wait, Dae-hyun said. Can I ask you something? How did they get all the way down to the lower maintenance levels? Those sections are restricted. Hira sighed, a very human gesture. Cubs are curious and clever. They discovered they could fit in the ventilation system. They thought they were exploring. They did not realize how easy it is to become lost in those tunnels. It is a lesson they will not forget. She spoke to the cubs in Vrakath, her tone stern. Both cubs lowered their heads, looking properly chastised. But when they looked back at Dae-hyun, their markings were still glowing that soft green. After they left, the medical bay became quiet. The doctors finished their work and gave Dae-hyun medication for the pain. Captain Yuna stayed behind, sitting in the chair Hira had vacated. You did good today, she said simply. You saved 2 lives and probably prevented a war. Not bad for a maintenance engineer. Dae-hyun laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at his bandaged shoulders. I didn't do it to prevent a war. They needed help. I know. That's what makes it matter. Yuna stood to leave, then paused at the door. The diplomatic summit is continuing tomorrow. Because of what you did, because you showed the Vrakath that humans can be trusted with their most precious things, the treaty talks are going better than anyone hoped. Ambassador Hira is telling her people about you. You're already famous among the Vrakath delegation. I don't want to be famous, I just want to go back to fixing pipes and checking systems. Yuna smiled. Too late for that. You're a cub guardian now. Your life just got a lot more complicated. She was right, of course. But as Dae-hyun drifted, off to sleep, exhausted and sore but strangely content, he found he didn't mind too much. He dreamed of soft, chittering sounds and glowing green markings, of small paws holding tight and trusting eyes watching him in the dark. 3 months had passed since the incident that changed everything. The stellar haven had returned to its normal rhythm, but normal was different now. The treaty between humans and the Vrakath clans had been signed with great ceremony. Trade agreements were being established. Cultural exchange programs were starting, and at the center of it all, in a way he never wanted or expected, was Dae-hyun. He still worked in maintenance, but his job description had expanded significantly. Now he spent half his time fixing systems and the other half serving as a cultural liaison between humans and Vrakath. It was exhausting and confusing and sometimes overwhelming, but it was also meaningful in a way his old job had never been. Right now, he was trying to repair a coolant pump in subsection 3, while 2 juvenile Vrakath followed him around, getting into everything they could reach. Neri, that's not a toy, Daehyun said without looking up from his work. He could hear her chirping as she played with a wrench that was almost as big as she was. Put it back in the toolbox, please. Neri made a protesting sound but obeyed. She had grown in the past 3 months. Both cubs had. They were bigger now, their juvenile spots beginning to fade into their adult coloring. Their crystalline ridges were more prominent, but they still acted like children, curious about everything and constantly testing boundaries. Cal was currently trying to climb into an open access panel. Daehyun gently pulled him back. Nobody. That's full of electrical systems. You'll get shocked, Cal grumbled but backed away. His bioluminescent markings flashed orange briefly, showing his annoyance before settling back to their normal blue-green. He had learned that Daehyun's rules were not negotiable, but he still liked to test them occasionally. A group of human engineers walked by, stopping to stare. They still weren't used to seeing a human casually working alongside Vrakath cubs. One of them, a young woman named Jiwoo who had just transferred to the station, looked nervous. "Is it safe?" she whispered to her companion, being that close to them. Her companion, an older engineer who had been on the station since before the incident, smiled. "That's Daehyun. The cubs are his responsibility. They're perfectly safe with him. But they're Vrakath. They're predators. They're also children. Watch." Neri had noticed the new people and was studying them with interest. She walked over to Daehyun and pressed against his leg, making a questioning chirp. He looked down at her and immediately understood. She wanted to meet the new human but was asking permission first. "It's okay," he said softly, scratching behind her ear ridges where she liked it. "You can say hello. Just be gentle." Neri approached Jiwoo slowly, her posture non-threatening. She sat down a few feet away and tilted her head, making soft chirping sounds. Jiwoo, despite her nervousness, found herself smiling. The cub looked almost like an oversized puppy, friendly and eager to interact. "Can I pet her?" Jiwoo asked Daehyun. "Let her sniff your hand first. If her markings stay green, she's comfortable with you." Jiwoo extended her hand carefully. Neri sniffed it, her whiskers twitching. Then her markings pulsed bright green and she pressed her head into Jiwoo's palm, purring. The young engineer laughed with delight, stroking the soft fur. "She's so soft. I thought she would feel different." "Cubs are softer than adults," Daehyun explained. "Their fur will get coarser as they grow up, and their claws will get sharper, so enjoy this while you can." Cal had wandered over to investigate as well. He was more reserved than his sister, watching the new human carefully before deciding she was acceptable. He allowed Jiwoo to pet him too, though he positioned himself between her and Neri protectively. "He's looking out for her," the older engineer observed. "Even though she's bigger than him now. He's always been protective," Daehyun said. "Even when they were stuck in that ventilation shaft, he tried to shield her. That hasn't changed." After the engineers left, Daehyun finished his work on the coolant pump and packed up his tools. "Okay, you two. Time for your afternoon lesson with your mother." Both cubs groaned, a sound they had learned from watching human children. They had learned a lot from observing humans over the past months. Some of it was useful, like basic hand signals and simple words. Some of it was less useful, like the groaning. "Don't give me that," Daehyun said, trying not to smile. "Your mother is teaching you important things about Vrakath history and culture. You need to pay attention." They trudged after him through the corridors, their tails dragging dramatically. Other station residents moved aside to let them pass, but now they did it with smiles instead of fear. The cubs had become minor celebrities on Stellar Haven. Everyone had heard the story of how a human maintenance worker had saved them and been adopted into their clan. Ambassador, Hira was waiting in one of the diplomatic suites that had been converted into a teaching space. She looked up as they entered, and her expression immediately sharpened. "Cal, Neri, you are late." The cubs straightened up, their playful demeanor vanishing. In the presence of their mother, the ambassador, they became proper young Vrakath, standing at attention with their tails still. "I'm sorry," Daehyun said. "That's my fault." The coolant pump repair took longer than expected. Hira's expression softened. You work too hard, Cub Guardian. You should delegate some tasks to others. I like the hands-on work. It keeps me grounded. He gestured to the cubs. They were very helpful today. Only tried to climb into electrical panels twice. Improvement, Hira said dryly. Last week it was 5 times. She looked at her children. Go prepare for your lessons. I need to speak with Dae-hyun privately. The cubs chirped their agreement and scampered off to another room. Once they were gone, Hira's formal posture relaxed slightly. Over the months, she and Dae-hyun had developed an unusual friendship built on their shared responsibility for the cubs. I have news, she said. The Council of Clans has officially approved your status as Cub Guardian. You are now recognized by all Vrakath as a member of Clan Bloodridge. This comes with certain rights and responsibilities. More responsibilities? Dae-hyun asked. I already have about 10 jobs. This one is important. In 2 months, there will be a gathering of all the major clans on the Vrakath homeworld. It is a traditional ceremony that happens once every 5 years. Kalaneri must attend, and as their guardian, you must attend as well. Dae-hyun felt his stomach drop. Me? Go to the Vrakath homeworld? I don't think that's a good idea. I'm human. I'll stand out. Yes, you will stand out. That is the point. Hira sat down, gesturing for him to do the same. Dae-hyun, you must understand what you have become. You are the first non-Vrakath to be named Cub Guardian. Every clan wants to meet you. They want to see the human who saved cubs that were not his own, who bled for them, who carries them through stations like they are his family. I'm not special. I just did what anyone would do. No. Hira's voice was firm. Most would not. This is what makes you remarkable, and what makes you valuable as a bridge between our peoples. You do not see your own actions as special, which makes them more special to us. She leaned forward. The gathering will be challenging. You will be tested. Some clans will doubt you. Some will challenge your right to the title. But the cubs need you there. And I would like you there as well. Dae-hyun thought about it. The idea of visiting an alien homeworld was terrifying, but the thought of the cubs going without him was worse. They had become a huge part of his life. When he woke up in the morning, he thought about their lessons for the day. When he worked, he planned his schedule around their needs. They had somehow become his responsibility, his purpose. Okay, he said finally. I'll go, but you have to promise to keep me from making any huge cultural mistakes. Hira's expression became what Dae-hyun had learned to recognize as a smile. I promise to try, though mistakes are part of learning. A crash came from the other room, followed by guilty chirping. Both adults sighed simultaneously. They found the teaching displays again, Hira said. I'll go check, Dae-hyun offered, standing up. He found the cubs tangled in a holographic projection system, looking thoroughly embarrassed. Neri had somehow wrapped herself in the cables while Cal was trying to free her, and only making it worse. They both looked up at Dae-hyun with those large, pleading eyes. Help? Neri chirped. Dae-hyun couldn't help but laugh. You two are impossible. Hold still. He spent the next 10 minutes carefully untangling them, while they alternated between trying to help and making things worse. When he finally freed the last cable, both cubs immediately climbed onto him in what had become their favorite position. Neri on his back, Cal on his shoulders. It was harder now that they were bigger, but Dae-hyun had gotten stronger over the months. Hira appeared in the doorway, watching the scene. Her expression was unreadable, but there was warmth in her eyes. When I first saw you in that corridor, covered in blood and carrying my cubs, I thought I was seeing a kidnapper. Now I see my children's second father. Life is strange. Very strange, Dae-hyun agreed. But not bad. No, Hira said quietly. Not bad at all. She began the afternoon's lesson, teaching the cubs about Vrakath history and tradition. Dae-hyun stayed to listen, learning alongside them. He needed to know these things if he was going to their homeworld. He needed to understand the culture he was now impossibly part of.